here as the AI Planetary Justice Alliance. I'm going to be presenting to you a little bit about ourselves, our organization, what we do, our work. And we are going to be specifically diving into the model training stage, so looking at what it takes to train an AI model from a planetary justice perspective. So that means from a social perspective, but also from an environmental perspective. So the Alliance is a global collective. We are all over the place. We are from all over the world. We are fully remote, so we work remotely, and we are just a bunch of people doing research, activism, art. Hi, thanks for joining. We're just getting started, so no worries. And we have a supply chain focus, which means we look at artificial intelligence from the supply chain perspective, which means, when we think about what is AI, it's not just, clouds and sort of a digital, ethereal, untouchable entity. It's very pragmatic. It depends on very specific and material processes. And so that's what we mainly focus on, is where does that start from? So for instance, where are the minerals that are necessary for data centers to be built? Where are they extracted from? What are the social justice and human rights implications of that? What are the environmental implications of that? We are a full house. I am here as the founder of the AI Planetary Justice Alliance. We are a global collective of individuals doing research, activism, and artwork to bring more awareness to artificial intelligence and its environmental and social implications. We are very much focused on the material side of artificial intelligence, which means we look at what is AI made of from a material perspective. So what kind of minerals go into data centers or GPUs, which are the chips. I'm not sure what's your background. I would actually like to know what you guys' background is, but we can chat about it later. So we have a strong justice orientation, which means we look at environmental justice as well as social justice, and we try to look at those kind of interconnectedly, so we don't exclusively look at one more than the other. And we hope that our research and our awareness-raising work will be translated in policy work. So this is the homepage of our website that we're very proud of. You can check out all of our things on our website that I'm going to share with you guys later. So what is planetary justice? Because I realize this is a bit of a strange word. Planetary justice comes from the term planetarity, which was coined by Dr. Spivak, and it refers to the relational understanding of the resources that our planet offers us and every other more than human being. So we look at people, but also the ecosystems, which means, trees and mountains and rocks, and kind of look at how all of the different elements of the planet are affected by each other. The justice part comes in because, historically, the Earth's resources haven't been justly distributed. And so we take a look at that and we look at what the AI supply chain kind of reinforces in terms of power disimbalances, also from a geopolitical perspective. And so what does, the difference in power between the global majority and the global minority, so the global south and the global north, and how does that affect the way that our artificial intelligence systems are marketed and also employed? So I want to start from defining a little bit what AI is. What are we talking about? I'm not going to define what AI is. I'm just going to give you guys an understanding of what exactly we mean and what we're talking about here in this room when we talk about artificial intelligence. When I think about AI, even for the work of the Alliance, to understand what it is that we want to include or not include in our work, we typically look at large-scale models. So, you can have a very simple, small-scale task-specific, localized AI model, and that's going to be probably, a very traditional rules-based model. That's not really what we talk about here because that's not super resource intensive. It doesn't really consume much. It doesn't really take much in terms of resources. So what we really think about when we talk about AI here is the highly centralized, general purpose, large scale, bigger is better kind of AI, which is honestly what common people that aren't really in the field usually think about nowadays, because ever since ChatGPT became, this massive thing, now every time you go on the street and you say AI, people think that AI is ChatGPT, which obviously isn't. But ChatGPT is actually one of the things that we do care about because it's so resource intensive. So again, what does that look like? How is AI made of? We're going to go through a little bit of the AI supply chain. I'm going to try and be super fast, just because I want to involve you guys. We have a bit of an interactive session later on, so I want to start there as soon as possible. I actually need to keep track of time. So first off, this is kind of the supply chain, right? I have to make a disclaimer in saying that supply chains are complicated. They're not, easy 6 stages, super easy to draw kind of processes. They are very complicated. The AI supply chain is not one supply chain, it's hundreds and hundreds of different supply chains intersecting, is many different industries as well intersecting. But we do need to start somewhere, and we do need to kind of pinpoint some things here and there. And so this is what we decided to start from. This is a framework based on the work by Sasha Lucioni. She's a great researcher and sort of professional in the field. And so we start from raw material extraction. Raw material extraction is basically everything you need for the equipment, which is chips, data centers, batteries, any sort of cooling mechanism. Everything is very material, and so you need minerals, basically. So raw material extraction looks at where do you get those minerals, what minerals are being extracted for AI, and what are the social and environmental implications of extracting those minerals. Then, that's when, chips are made, and they're, after they're being designed, you will have TSMC, and this is what we're going to be looking at a bit more in depth today. And then you market the model. So you throw it into society. And that's when, things like AI discrimination and algorithmic bias and sort of exclusion of the already marginalized people can happen. And then once all of that is done, you usually dispose of all of the components. So that's not just, your laptop or your phone, it's also GPUs, for instance. GPUs are extremely, extremely overworked, which means their lifespan is usually about a couple of years. So every couple of years, you need to really just throw them out. Same thing goes for a lot of other components from data centers as well. And we know that also our laptops and our phones are kind of programmed to only last for about 5 to 6 years. So where does that all go? I see that you can't see we try to depict in a very specific way in terms of the sub-life cycle of the specific stage we're looking at. So when we think about the life cycle of training an AI model, usually again, I'm not sure what you guys' background is, but just to give each other sort of the same language, when we think of training an AI model, what we're looking at is, we're collecting the data, we're preparing the data, which means, there's a lot of data work involved. So there's people usually in the global majority and usually very poorly paid, doing the annotation, the labeling, kind of basically saying, to a computer, they're saying, this is a phone, that is a marker, that this is a table, and they're just doing this over and over and over again. Oftentimes this means, this is about content moderation, which means they're probably looking at very traumatizing content, which can be videos, which can be text, can be photos of people, doing horrible things. So that's very traumatizing. There's been amazing work being done in the field about investigations of people doing data work. Recently, there's actually been some investigations being done that said that OpenAI actually employed people in Kenya for $2 an hour, and they were not actually given any support from a psychological perspective. So there's been suicides, there's been lots of things from a human rights perspective, and we don't really talk about it much usually. So that's what happens when we think about data collection and preparation. This is part of that process as well. Then you have training runs, which means once the data set is ready, you're going to be basically feeding all this data to the model. And so you're going to just give it as much information as you can, telling it, this is what you need to know, this is the right answer, please duplicate it. Like, repeat that process over and over again. And then once you do that, you evaluate whether that was successful or not. Times, which did the investigation about OpenAI and Sama in Kenya. This is actually a data center right here in Mekaguda, right next to you guys. We're actually going to go there in a few days, which is great. Sure that is being constructed. This is a little bit of the minerals that you need for making AI and for training AI. So what does training model look like? Chips, everything that kind of comes with the materiality of artificial intelligence. So now I'm gonna give you guys a bit of a taste of what we call the indicators. The indicators are essentially topics of concern for us, right? Things that we tend to look at when we think of the impact of artificial intelligence during model training, but also during all the other phases. So one of them for model training specifically is water consumption. I think you might have heard about this. There's been lots of work being done in the past few years, actually a few months really. But there have been lots of investigations saying, to train a data model, you need lots and lots of water. That is basically because data centers get really hot when they're doing the computation and the processing of data. And to maintain temperatures that allow the processing to keep going and to avoid the data center kind of overheating, you will need a lot of water to cool down the temperatures, right? The water that you need is not any sort of water. You need fresh water, which means potable water. So of course that's worrisome to a lot of communities. Especially, there's been lots and lots of testimonies from communities in the United States. We know that the United States is actually the place with the highest number of data centers in the world, and specifically highest number of hyperscale data centers, which are AI data centers. We know that not every data center is for AI. We look specifically at AI data centers, and those are the ones that really need so much water. There's been speculation really because we don't have the actual data because it's considered proprietary data because it's company data. But there's been a few people kind of trying to understand how much water these models could take. And one in particular stated that GPT-3, which is the model under ChatGPT-3, consumed roughly 700,000 liters of water. Fresh water, again, that's a lot of water. So that's one of the things we take a look at specifically. Another thing is land occupation. These data centers are gigantic. You can see in that picture, I think that is Georgia, if I'm not wrong, and these data centers are enormous. Usually they are right next to agricultural land, which means all of the pollution that comes from the data centers will affect the crops and sort of the livestock as well. And besides that, it's just a lot of soil and land being occupied. A lot of this is usually right next to homes as well. There's been people in the United States, again, kind of giving testimony of how much noise the data center makes while it's running, and how it's kind of the noise, you can feel it and you can hear it from your house. And there's a lot of people that have been saying, I've had trouble sleeping at night because I constantly have this like rumbling noise, which has given anxiety and insomnia to people. So that's another thing. And then we have, of course, energy consumption. We know that right now data centers use about 1.5% of worldwide power. That probably looks like very little. It's actually a lot. There are data centers that consume as much as small towns, and they're projected to consume more and more and more and more, because we do live right now in a moment where every AI company is basically rushing to build as much power and as many data centers as possible. You then have labor extraction that I talked a little bit about before. There's a lot of labor involved. It's not just about annotating data and doing the data work behind making a model intelligent, because models are not really intelligent. It's really humans behind it that kind of teach it how to perform intelligence. And it's not just about that. It's also, we look at, if we were talking about mining, for instance, the first stage of the life cycle, we would be looking at what are the labor conditions of people mining the materials. But for model training, we're going to be focusing on what are the labor implications of training a model, which most of the times is mainly about data work. Then you have data-driven discrimination. During training the model, you will have a lot of bias go into the model. There's not ever going to be a model that doesn't have bias, just to say that bluntly. Just because whenever you're teaching something what is X, you're automatically saying it's, everything that is not X is not going to be included. And you can't include everything in the world. You can't quantify human life or more than human life. And so it's always going to be biased. But surprise, surprise, the bias that we see today is usually gender bias. It's usually racial bias. And so all of the, kind of exclusions and marginalizations that already exist in our societies, these models are just reproducing because they're learning from us. We're teaching them, usually the most successful person for this job is a white man, 50-year-old. And so the model is not like the model itself has a passion for 50-year-old white males. It's just that statistically, that's the most successful person for the job. And that's just a reflection of what we already kind of see. Right? We know that to train ChatGPT, OpenAI stole data from the internet, from your comments, your pictures, your recollection of your weekend on Instagram. Everything that is online has been scraped and has been used to train the data. This also includes, books. It includes all sort of art that artists have produced and published online. And that is how AI nowadays can, produce images, is because they've fed the model so many images without actually the owner's consent. So that's another issue that we tend to look at. So when I say that we tend to look at, to do that, I mean we use this tool that you can find on our website. This is the AI Supply Chain Impact Framework. And this is basically a document where we trace the supply chain and we trace different indicators, as I mentioned. Indicators is just a fancy word to say things that we care about. So for instance, in model training, in the framework, you will see we have energy use. Oh no, you can't see. You can't see all of it. Okay, let's look at that. So before this, okay, here we go. After the indicator, you will find questions. So those are questions relative to the indicator specifically. So when we think about energy use, what are some of the things we want to know about to be able to assess the impact of the AI model we're looking at? So for instance, we could ask, what's the total energy consumption to train this model? We could think about what percentage of the energy used to train the model has been sourced from renewables. We could even think about how is that renewable energy being sourced? Because not all renewable energy is great, right? There's been a lot of instances where, for renewable energy, you need to mine cobalt, and cobalt is mined in the Republic of Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we know that children are mining that mineral. So those are also that's an example of, the complexity of what we're looking at, because you have the environmental side of things, which is, as long as you're not using coal, that's great. But then, not really, because to make batteries for renewables, you need lithium. And we know that lithium is being extracted in Chile, where indigenous communities have been displaced and where a lot of their cultural sort of life has been really disrupted. And then after we think of the questions, which is basically what do we want to know about the indicator, we then think of where to look for that answer. Where can we learn about the things we want to know about? And so we think of potential stakeholders, which is another fancy way of saying the people who can tell us. And so in this instance it could be data center operations. They're not going to tell us how much energy they consume, really, because again, proprietary information, but they could tell us a little bit about other sort of data points that we can then sort of put together and try to hopefully understand. And second, we can think about sustainability consultants. We can think about any sort of person that has the information that we're looking for. And then we think of data sources, because a lot of the times maybe that information is already out there. We just need to look for it. It's not a person that is going to give us the answer. Maybe it's an environmental impact assessment. And so a lot of the times those are public. And so that's what we usually try to look at. So, how did I do? Now, I would like for us to think of some indicators and questions together. So it's going to be two phases. The first phase, we're going to be brainstorming indicators, and I'm going to write on this sheet of paper all the things you say to me. It can be water. It can be things we've already discussed. And then you guys are going to take a Post-it. Oh, thank you.
Things that we don't see in front of us. So any industry for that matter, they've always been these questions of what kind of environmental impact it has and what kind of things, even for the garment industry or even for a lot of other industries, these questions come up. So when we talk specifically about AI, the general framework also applies, right? It applies to any industry in terms of what kind of environmental impact you're creating. So the context of what we're speaking, whether it be in terms of electricity, water consumption, etc. The regular norms which are supposed to be adhered to by any industry, to what extent has that been helpful in regulating these concerns that you have?
Yeah, I think is very complicated because the AI supply chain is so dislocated across the world. So if you take a specific example of, say Sama workers, Sama is the third-party operator for ChatGPT when it comes to training and kind of annotating data. If you take that example, for instance, you're going to be looking at the regulations in Kenya. And it's really hard because you can't make regulations for AI, right? You're going to have to look at specific countries. That makes it very complicated also because you have so many kind of elements that go into it. So you're going to have, regulations for labor protection for mining. You're going to have regulations for, sort of environmental impact assessments that are required or not required. So it's a bit of a mess, right? You can't really pinpoint exactly what's the regulation or like what's the branch of the regulatory system that we can refer to. I think a lot of the times, we can learn from other industries. We can learn from mining industries, for instance, and kind of apply that. We can learn from a lot of these industries really, which are kind of intersecting, and a lot of other fields as well. We can learn from environmental justice activists that have been doing this work a lot of the time. So I think this is so interdisciplinary and so complicated really, that it requires as many people as possible on it. And I think international standards are going to be helpful. They're trying, so fingers crossed. Practical and even technical, really, solutions to a lot of these problems. But why aren't they implemented?
Which is because I think the other way around.
That can be annoying, but it can also be an opportunity to say, hey, that shiny toy that you love so much? That's causing children to die, and that's causing, entire forests to be destroyed. And so those are things that have been happening. It's not like forests weren't destroyed before AI. It's not like we weren't mining cobalt before. But I think because there's so much funding, really, as well, there's so much policy attention on this, and I think it's an opportunity to say, all these things you guys have been doing, they're not great. Like, we need to stop them.
It's amazing.
And under-resourced countries in various forms for your own enrichment.
Yeah.
And again, no surprise there, it's the same set of countries,
Yeah.
right, on either side.
Yeah, thank you. Pro-social, what's the other word you said?
You're making it up, I think.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what we're doing. All of us. Any indicator?
Efficient enough to compete globally or not.
Right.
So that's the one factor which I
data center. Now, while AI is inflicting and it's not just limited to the area, but there are people also benefiting from it.
Yeah.
So one has to be
Yeah.
So maybe it's a change from an agricultural setup. That's a good thing, but it's what's going to happen.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. I think
Maybe it's in its nascent state. So governments to adopt such models will take some time, but there might be a sliver of hope in the future.
Yeah. I think the social opportunities, which are really economic opportunities. Whenever they build a data center, they say we're going to give you hundreds of jobs, and people are very happy about it, of course. Unfortunately, what we know is those jobs only last for the construction process of the data center. So they're going to employ a couple hundred people from the local area to construct the data center, and then a year goes by, 2 years goes by in the best of scenarios, and they don't really have many jobs, because to run a data center you don't really need that many people, and especially you don't need local people. There's been there are so many people that work from Germany in a data center in Hyderabad. And so I think that's one of the things is, kind of building community to counter the narratives that they bring people with. Because of course these are people that don't know what a data center does or is
Essentially riding on ignorance.
happening in that particular case. And what we've seen is a lot of these AI models actually reproduce Western-centric understandings of agriculture and very industrialized levels of agriculture. And so what we've seen is a lot of the people that are actually doing the farming, they, first of all, are a bit disregarded in terms of their expertise and their experience and the fact that, you know, they are the ones doing the job. But if an AI is telling them, you know, you should do this instead of that, that is what is actually kind of prioritized. So there's a question of to what end, if the production of crops is higher, if the yield is higher, that's great. But on the other side is, are we making our soils completely infertile because we're trying to extract so much from them? And I'm talking about, again, I think when we think about AI, I'm talking about large scale models, right? So a scale that tries to know everything and be everything. Whereas, you know, a simple rules-based model can easily tell you like what's the best time of year to put that seed or that other seed. And I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. You know, if you have a very simple model for that specific task, I think then, you know, AI is great for agriculture. But if we're talking about general hyper models that tell you how to be a farmer, then I don't know, because it's also a question of justice in terms of knowledge, right?
Are the ones that fund the entire framework or the process chain, so to say. And what are their interests?
Yes.
And then the international agencies. So there are multiple entities involved
Yeah.
that have their interests in.
Yeah.
That's something we have to look at.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. I don't want to necessarily answer because I want to take as many indicators as possible. The government is handling that.
Exactly.
It's-
Because I like to know how the other countries are working on it.
Yes. So I think that kind of relates to the thing we were talking about before, which is, you know, this has been happening, right? Extraction specifically from African countries in terms of, you know, minerals. I mean, we have developed the West on that, right? So I think we know how that goes. The government in Congo, I'm probably not the best person to ask this because I haven't really done in-depth work in terms of how the government is really handling things. What I can tell you is it's enabling everything that's happening, right? Because again, there's a power imbalance with the world, but also, you know, I don't think the global South and global North discourse is more complicated than, you know, global South countries are all good and great and they love their people and the representatives of the government of Congo are being forced to do all that. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right to also kind of, you know, even with indigenous people, a lot of the times people think that indigenous people are like the best people in the world. I'm sure they're like terrible people in indigenous communities as well. Like, I'm sure they're human, right?
True.
Like, you shouldn't kind of make them sacred just because they're them. So I'm sure you know, the power imbalances that kind of characterize everything that we've been talking about are very complicated. And so there's imbalances between geopolitical powers, but there's also imbalances within marginalized communities, right? We know that there's imbalances. It's about intersectionality, right?
True.
So yeah, I'm sorry I don't really have specifics about what the government of Congo
But I
is
got
doing.
it. Yeah, I got the point.
But yeah, it's
An efficient program written. So that means the redundancy of that AI model is increased and we have to fine tune it many times. So,
Yeah.
which means we need to use more computational power,
Yeah.
and which uses more resources.
Yeah.
So that's one point. Another point is that when we compare, the environmental impact of AI to other things like crypto mining, cloud computing, or quantum computing, we have to get our priorities straight, because if anything done in a large scale can be catastrophic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I very much agree with that. Huge scale, like who's actually benefiting from Bitcoin? Like, sure, a bunch of people that have made a lot of money. That's great. But like, I don't know if it has a social, interest. What is ChatGPT doing for anyone? Except, making their homework easier and our jobs easier. But that's because we have jobs that require us to stay in front of a computer for 9 hours a day, which shouldn't be the case in the first place. And so ChatGPT sure helps us in terms of maybe resisting that system, but not really. It's more like a fake solution to a systemic problem. And so, yeah, efficiency and accuracy are definitely resource intensive, and I think, efficiency as a discourse in general is problematic just in terms of what do we mean by efficiency. Effectiveness is probably more socially and environmentally just, but in the tech world we usually talk about efficiency, and we know from environmental scientists' work that usually if something is made more efficient, then you're just going to make more use of it, right? The Jevons paradox is something that usually environmentalists talk a lot about. So if you make a chip, for instance, more efficient, you can have more and more transistors on it, blah, blah, blah. It's faster and faster. That doesn't mean that you're going to be using it less because it's more efficient. You're just going to use more of it. So, that's also why we work 40 hours a week in the best of cases instead of like 1, right? We could work like so much less, but we don't. And so, sorry, that was very pessimistic.
Distraction. But in the sense of what it does to, so can you have law as a framework in the sense to see how the terms of usage in an AI redefine certain relationship which already exist in law. So say for example, employees turns into contractors, you give away, understand it from contracts, you give away a lot of your right, what are those and how they are worded, where you actually create new categories of people that don't exist in law as it's understanding right now. So what are those categories created, and what do they do? So say Aadhaar says that I'm just giving an example, that's not an AI, but I'm just giving an example that I have a right to an identity, and that's the right that I have. But I already have an identity. What are you giving me extra to call it as a right? Right? And I am already working for you 9 hours a day, which I will work in a company, call me an employee. When I work for you, you call me something else. So how does AI in their operations redefine certain legal relationships? I think those creep into our legal discourse as if they are the truth, and I think we need to challenge that as well and put that in a framework.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But yeah, we definitely can use already sort of existing systems of thinking, I think, from the legal field as well as from so many other fields. And I think we definitely should do that, and we definitely should bring as many people with that mindset, sort of talking to people that have maybe a completely different mindset, to kind of understand what's our ultimate goal, what are we trying to do here, and how can we reach that goal with so many different perspectives. And I think, honestly, like so many of these problems are going to be solved with laws, just because that's how our society works, right? Like people usually not people, but like systems of people, and communities usually stop doing things when they can't do them anymore, and the incentive is higher for not doing them than doing them, right? So I think we definitely need the law. It's complicated because what kind of law? I don't really know. It's different in every country, again, and so I think that's the biggest problem that we have.
Sorry. So my issue is not
Super interesting, but I think, again, we've seen that in many other fields as well, and I think it's all about whether we accept it or not, and so I think we need to really have conversations. So, conversations amongst lawyers, for instance, and say, hey, do we actually want to use that term? And also maybe question what's the implications of adopting that term, because a lot of the terms related to artificial intelligence are terms about, like efficiency and gains and optimization, and there's such a big discourse around bigger is better and faster is better, and basically, neoliberal capitalism. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point about how is AI also redefining the language we use and the way we think as well. But I would love to learn more about that because you definitely know more about it than me.